I am Diane Macklin. Welcome to this celebration of Juneteenth here at the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture. Juneteenth has been around for over 150 years, celebrated from Texas to Minnesota, Maine to Florida, California to Washington State. Now you might think 150 years, that's so long ago. But I am sure that in your family, you have a recipe that has been around well over 150 years because it's just that good. You might even have an article of clothing or a piece of jewelry or a book or a letter. It is a day that we honor that on June 19, 1865, in Galveston, Texas, there were those that were about to get good news. They were in bondage. They were in slavery. And on that day, they found out about the Emancipation Proclamation issued in 1863 that said they were free. There was crying, cheers, laughter, applause. And we have been celebrating this day that has other names as well. Sometimes it's called Freedom Day. Other times, Emancipation Day, or my favorite, Jubilee Day. Because I imagine the joy was palpable. And as with celebrations, there's laughter. Folks play games. They dance, they sing, and they eat very well. But better yet, there are stories. The story I have for you is a story that's been passed down generation after generation after generation. A story that was held in the oral tradition. People told it to one another, that now you can find in many different books. A story with an American folk hero. Now you might know one, Brer Rabbit. Bro Rabbit, Brother Rabbit, Briar Patch Rabbit. That rabbit has a lot of names. But running parallel with those stories are High John stories. And upon occasion, rare occasion, they cross over. You have stories with the animals and stories with the people together. This story is often referred to as tops and bottoms. But as a storyteller, what I do is take the words and stretch them and get inside and find the story that I am a part of as well. John knew the land. He knew the land so well. He felt as if the land loved him and he loved the land. And he knew how to grow anything and everything. Some said that he could pick up a rock and make it sprout. He was so good at growing. But he knew something. There had been a couple of pieces of paper. There was that Emancipation Proclamation in 1863. There was that 13th Amendment added to the Constitution in 1865 that said that there would be no slavery in America. It'd been a few years since then, and John knew. It was easy to change a piece of paper, but real hard to change the mind and heart of man. He had left the farm that he had been enslaved at. At that time, he had to call him Master Jones, but now he would see him upon occasion in town, and he had to call him Mr. Jones. And he knew Mr. Jones was waiting for him to come back. When John left, everybody else left with him. And John had a family, a wife. He had 3 children. He had been doing jobs here and there, but the land called him. But so many sharecroppers, those that rented land from those that had held them in bondage, were cheated out of everything they grew. And sometimes, at the end of a harvest season, found themselves owing more and in debt. John didn't want this to happen to him, but the earth called. He told his wife what he planned to do. And the day that he was to leave and speak to Mr. Jones, his wife said, "John, you be careful now. Watch your words." And he left with that advice. He came walking down the lane and he saw Mr. Jones sitting on his porch. All the fields, no one was working them. And Mr. Jones was rocking back and forth, and he was grinning. Mr. Jones knew something. If John came back, so would many others. He could get his farm up and running again. John walked up. "Good day, Mr. Jones. I wanted to know if I could rent that land way back yonder beyond the trees, near the creek that sometimes overflows into the fields." "John, what are you going to pay me with to rent those fields? I know what you left here with, and it wasn't much." "Well, we can find a way that I could pay." "I know a way you could pay, but I get to say how much. And if you don't like it, you can go someplace else." Now, John thought about these words and felt in some ways there was a trick in there, but he knew he couldn't say much. "You get to name how much you get." "Well, John, we grew cotton here on this farm, and I'm thinking that you wanted to do the same." Well, John nodded. Yes, he had planned to grow cotton. "And well, I get the top and you get the bottom. That's the price you have to pay." He had agreed. He was a man of his word, John. "You get the top and I'll get the bottom." Now he went home and told his wife what happened. And she looked at him. "John, think about it. You know what to do." An idea sprung up inside of him, and he went and bought seed. His whole family and some of the community came together, and they planted that seed. And in time, it was harvest time. Now, John knew something about Mr. Jones. He would not come until that time. He did not like to get his hands dirty. And Mr. Jones came walking from his home down the lane towards those trees. There have been plenty of times where John tricked me, but not this time. I can't wait to see all that cotton. John came running over to Mr. Jones. "I'm so glad you decided to come at harvest time to see what is planted. Look at this wonderful field. Now remember what you said. You get the top and I get the bottom. Well, look at this field of potatoes. Now some of those potatoes are probably as big as your head. You get the greens that are coming out the top and I get the potatoes on the bottom. Oh, John, I don't want those greens on top. Remember what you said. They'll make good compost. You keep those greens. You keep the whole thing. But next time I get the bottom and you get the top. If you don't like it, go someplace else. John agreed. He had planned to grow another field of potatoes. He could tell the soil was right for it. Mr. Jones stormed off and he went home and he told his wife what happened. John, you know what to do. And he went and bought seed, started to plant it with his family, the community. Some of them helped. He knew that Mr. Jones was not going to come until harvest time. And at that time, Mr. Jones came walking down that lane. He may have fooled me once, but he's not going to fool me again. I know this time I'm going to get. John came running over. Mr. Jones, I'm so glad you came at harvest time. Remember what you said. You get the bottom and I get the top. Look at this wonderful golden field of wheat. You get the stalk and the roots. Makes good compost. And I get all the kernels of wheat. I'm going to have good bread this year. I don't want the stalk and the roots. I don't want any. John, next time I get the top and the bottom. If you don't like it, go someplace else. The top and the bottom. John agreed. Mr. Jones stormed off. He went home. He told his wife what happened. John, you know what to do. He went and bought seed. He and his family planted it, and some of the community helped as well. He knew Mr. Jones would not return until harvest time. Well, eventually, Mr. Jones came walking down that lane. He tricked me twice. He tricked me twice, but he won't trick me again. He won't trick me. John came running over. Mr. Jones, I'm so glad you came at harvest time. Remember what you said. You get the top and the bottom. But you never said anything about a middle. Look at this wonderful field of corn. You get the tassels, you get the stalks and the roots, but I get all the corn ears in the middle. Some of those corn ears are as big as your ears. John, he was so angry he could barely speak. But he slowed down a bit. He looked around, and wisdom caught up to him. John, I will take half of whatever you get. That will be a fine price by me. As long as you remember, you get half of what I get. That's a fine price by me too. John was one of the few sharecroppers that did not lose all that work that was done. Lose everything. This was one sharecropper who actually was paid a fair price for the work that was done. Stories. They're a place we can find our freedom. We can find justice. May we all find those stories and keep telling them.